Picture this. You're standing on the rooftop of a 3-story hotel in downtown Sacramento, watching a full-size steamboat paddle past the second-floor windows while a preacher in a rowboat baptizes a cow. This is not a dream. This is California, January 1862. And for the next 43 days, the Golden State becomes the largest freshwater lake on Earth. What follows is the true, unfiltered saga of the Great Flood of 1862. The disaster that drowned a state, bankrupted a government, killed thousands no one counted, and quietly built the modern American West. Buckle up. The water is rising. The first drop hit the tin awning of the Orion Saloon at 7:12 p.m. on Christmas Eve 1861. It was fat, cold, and unremarkable. The second drop followed 3 seconds later. By 7:30, the sky over Sacramento had unzipped itself and was pouring. Miners in the saloon laughed. Another wet California winter. They had no idea the laugh would be their last dry one for 6 weeks. Sacramento in 1861 was 11 years old and drunk on ambition. Gold had cooled, but land fever burned hotter. The city's grid, laid out in 1848 by John Sutter Jr., was a checkerboard of wooden false fronts, brick ambitions, and mud. J Street was the main artery. Saloons, dry goods stores, a theater that advertised Macbeth with real blood, pigs mostly. The new state capitol rose half-finished on 10th Street, its sandstone blocks still smelling of quarry dust. Chinese laborers, paid $1 a day, were hammering the last spikes into the Sacramento Valley Railroad, dreaming of tying the Pacific to the nation. Native Miwok and Nisenan families camped on the city's edges, trading acorn meal for coffee and watching the white men build on their old fishing grounds. William H. Brewer, a Yale-trained geologist with the California State Geological Survey, had ridden through the Central Valley that October. His journal entry for October 12 reads, "The soil here is black, 30 feet deep in places. Wheat yields 60 bushels to the acre without manure. The rivers, the Sacramento, American, Feather, Yuba, are lazy brown ribbons between cottonwoods. Levees are low, but the settlers say, 'We've had floods before, we'll have them again. I see no cause for alarm.'" Brewer was a scientist. He believed in data. The data lied. The rain intensified overnight. By Christmas morning, the American River, normally a placid stream where children panned for color, had risen 6 feet. By noon, it was lapping the doorstep of the Ebner Brothers Hotel on K Street. The owner, a German immigrant named Frederick Ebner, stacked sandbags and cursed in 3 languages. By dusk, the sandbags were underwater. Day 2, December 26. The Sacramento River gauge at the I Street Bridge read 22 feet, flood stage. Day 3, 24 feet. Day 4, 26 feet. The gauge only went to 30. On day 5, the gauge itself floated away. The city's levees, built in the 1850s by optimists who thought 6 feet was plenty, crumbled like stale bread. Water poured through the breaks in brown rivers of its own. Residents woke to find their parlors ankle-deep, then knee-deep, then waist-deep. Furniture floated, chickens perched on pianos. One family on 4th Street reported their cat riding a doorsill like a surfboard. Captain Isaiah Woods, master of the steamboat Dove, saw opportunity where others saw ruin. He tied his 140-foot paddle wheeler to the second-story balcony of the Western Hotel and began ferrying passengers to the few remaining dry knolls south of the city. His logbook entry for December 29 took on 87 souls, 3 dogs, 1 goat, and Mrs. Haskell's rosewood armoire. Charged $2 a head, $5 for the armoire. Business brisk. By New Year's Eve, Sacramento was a Venice of despair. Residents traveled by skiff, canoe, or improvised raft. The Sacramento Union newspaper relocated its presses to the second floor of a warehouse on Front Street and printed the January 1 edition on a hand-cranked press, while water lapped the windows. The headline? "The deluge continues. City a lake." The paper sold for $1 a copy, normally 5 cents, because newsboys delivered by rowboat. Governor-elect Leland Stanford prepared for his January 10th inauguration. His mansion on N Street was already underwater. Tailors in San Francisco rushed to finish his inaugural suit. Stanford reportedly told an aide, "If I must be sworn in wearing hip boots, so be it." Meanwhile, the Central Valley was vanishing. The valley, 300 miles long, 50 miles wide, flat as a billiard table, was a natural flood basin. For millennia, winter rains and Sierra snowmelt had spread across it like a slow-motion tide, sustaining wetlands that teemed with geese, elk, and grizzly bears. White settlers had drained the swamps, plowed the tule marshes, and built farms on what they called reclaimed land. Nature was about to reclaim it back. On January 9, 1862, day 17 of the reign, William Brewer stood on a narrow levee 5 miles south of Sacramento. His boots sank in mud. Before him stretched an unbroken sheet of water. He wrote, "The valley is gone. From the coast range to the Sierra, nothing but water. Distance to the foothills, 40 miles, lost in haze. Telegraph poles mark the old road like buoys. A cow stands on a barn roof, lowing. I estimate the lake at 300 miles long, 60 wide, 15 to 20 feet deep. It is the largest body of fresh water west of the Mississippi." Brewer was not exaggerating. The flood created a temporary inland sea covering 10,000 square miles, larger than Lake Michigan. Depth varied, 5 feet over wheat fields, 30 feet in old river channels. The water was warm, 50 degrees F, and thick with silt, downed trees, and the occasional corpse. In the town of Marysville, 40 miles north, the Feather River rose 35 feet in 24 hours. Half the town washed away in a single night. Survivors climbed the brick courthouse and waited. One man, J.H. Smith, carved his name into a cottonwood. February 3, 1862, still here. He was rescued on February 7th, half-starved but alive. In the Delta, where the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers merge, levee failures turned islands into whirlpools. The town of Rio Vista disappeared entirely. Only the steeple of the Methodist Church remained above water. Chinese farm workers, hired to build the levees, watched their handiwork dissolve. One survivor, Ah Kwong, later told a San Francisco reporter, through a translator, "We built walls against the river. The river laughed." Native tribes suffered in silence. The Nisenan village of Sac on the American River was swept away on January 12. Elders later recounted, "The water came at night. It took the lodges, the acorn granaries, the children. We ran to the hills. When we returned, the river had moved." The Miwok on the Cosumnes lost an entire fishing camp to a mudslide. Only a child's moccasin, beaded with blue jay feathers, survived, snagged in a willow. Death was everywhere, but rarely counted. Official tallies later claimed 4,000 dead. The truth was higher, perhaps 10,000 or more. Chinese laborers, native families, Mexican vaqueros, and itinerant miners, they vanished without record. In one incident near Knight's Landing, a German family named Muller took refuge on their farmhouse roof. The father, Heinrich, tied his 8 children to the chimney with plow lines. When the house collapsed, the lines held, the current did not. Only the youngest, Anna, age 6, survived, found 3 days later on a floating door, clutching her rag doll. Anna grew up in San Francisco, became a teacher, and never spoke of the flood. But every winter she locked her doors at the first raindrop. The flood's economic toll was staggering. 1 million cattle drowned. 25% of the state's herd. Wheat crops rotted in the fields. Gold mines in the foothills filled like bathtubs. The state treasury, already strained by the Civil War, went bankrupt. Sacramento's tax rolls literally floated away. Yet amid the ruin, human ingenuity flickered. In Stockton, a merchant named Charles Weber organized a flotilla of rowboats to deliver flour and bacon to stranded families. In Sacramento, a blacksmith named Levi Strite built a flat-bottomed barge from wagon beds and ferried 200 people to safety. In the Sierra foothills, miners used sluice boxes as life rafts. On January 10th, Leland Stanford was inaugurated governor aboard the steamboat Antelope, anchored in San Francisco Bay. He wore hip boots under his frock coat. His speech lasted 3 minutes. "California is underwater. Our first duty is to drain it." The legislature decamped to San Francisco's Merchants Exchange Building. Sacramento remained the capital in name only. The rain continued. February arrived with a new horror. Warm storms from the Pacific, pineapple expresses, melting the Sierra snowpack. On February 8th, the American River rose another 10 feet overnight. Sacramento's water level hit 30 feet, 3 stories. The Dove steamboat now paddled over rooftops. Captain Woods logged, past the Capitol Dome at noon, water to the eagle's feet. Preacher Thomas Starr King, famed abolitionist and Unitarian minister, delivered sermons from a rowboat in the middle of J Street. His text, Genesis 7. His message, this is not punishment. This is reminder. The land was here before us. It will be here after. By mid-February, the inland sea had currents. Water flowed south at 3 miles per hour, carrying debris, livestock, and bodies toward the Carquinez Strait. San Francisco Bay turned brown and foamed with valley silt. Oysters in the bay died from freshwater shock. Then, on February 23, day 43, the rain stopped. The silence was deafening. Clouds parted, sunlight glittered on the lake. Steam rose from rooftops. For 3 days, the state held its breath. Then the water began to fall. Recession was slower than the rise. It took 6 weeks for the valley to drain. The Yolo Basin, west of Sacramento, remained a lake into April. Tulare Lake in the southern San Joaquin Valley, dry for decades, refilled to 700 square miles. Steamboats sailed where stagecoaches once ran. What emerged was a landscape transformed. Topsoil, centuries deep, was gone in places, leaving sterile sand. River channels had shifted miles. New lakes dotted the valley. The Sacramento River now ran 6 feet higher than before. Ghosts of old towns lay buried in silt. The human toll crystallized. Sacramento, 800 homes destroyed, 3,000 homeless. Marysville, half the city gone. Stockton, levees breached in 14 places. Statewide, $10 million in damage, $1862, equivalent to $300 million today. The state debt tripled overnight. But the flood's legacy was just beginning. In March 1862, a committee of engineers, farmers, and politicians met in San Francisco's Occidental Hotel. They called themselves the Swampland Commission. Their mandate? Prevent this from ever happening again. Their leader? William Hammond Hall, a 26-year-old civil engineer with a Stanford degree and a vision. Hall proposed a radical idea. Stop fighting the river. Work with it. His plan? Levees, higher, stronger, set back from the river to allow natural flooding in controlled zones. Bypasses, wide overflow channels to shunt floodwaters around cities. Weirs, gates to release water into bypasses during high flow. The centerpiece? The Sacramento Weir and Yolo Bypass, a 60,000-acre floodplain west of the city that would act as a safety valve. Construction began in 1867. Funding came from swampland sales, ironic since the flood had created the swamps. Chinese laborers, many flood survivors, built the levees with wheelbarrows, shovels, and willow root mats. Native workers taught them tule weaving to stabilize banks. By 1875, the first phase was complete. The system worked. In 1878, another big flood hit. The Yolo Bypass filled. Sacramento stayed dry. The Great Flood of 1862 faded from memory. The Civil War sucked oxygen from newspapers. Photographs, rare in 1862, never captured the flood's peak. Within a year, orchards bloomed where lakes had been. Railroads crossed the valley. The story became saloon lore. Yeah, I remember when the river ran through my bedroom. But the rivers remembered. In 1955, Christmas floods tested the system. The Yolo Bypass carried 600,000 cubic feet per second, 3 times the Amazon's average flow. Levees held. In 1986, February storms filled the bypass again. In 1997, New Year's floods breached levees in the Delta, but Sacramento was spared. Each time, engineers whispered, 1862 was bigger. In 2005, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and USGS launched the ArcStorm project. Atmospheric River K 1,000-year storm. They modeled a modern 1862, supercharged by climate change. The scenario? Duration? 23 days of rain, followed by 20 days of warm storm melting snow. Precipitation? 10 feet in the Sierra,
twice the 1862 total. Runoff: 1.5 million acre-feet per day, enough to fill the Rose Bowl every 90 seconds. Impacts: Sacramento underwater for 30 days. 1.5 million homes destroyed. 25% of California's buildings damaged. $725 billion in damage, 2011 dollars. 3 Hurricane Katrinas. Evacuation of 1.5 million people. Saltwater intrusion in the Delta ruins farmland for decades. Global supply chain collapse. No almonds, no tomatoes, no Silicon Valley chips. The report's final line: the Central Valley Flood Control System is not designed for an arc storm. In 2017, Oroville Dam's spillway cracked during heavy rains. 188,000 people evacuated downstream. It was a near miss. In 2023, 9 atmospheric rivers slammed California in 3 weeks. Tulare Lake reappeared, 114,000 acres of water where farms had been. Levees breached in Pajaro. The Yolo bypass filled to capacity. Governor Newsom declared a state of emergency. It was the closest call since 1862. The system held, barely. Today, the Great Flood lives in the landscape. Drive I-5 at night during a storm. The Yolo bypass glows under floodlights, a silver river where cattle once grazed. The Sacramento Weirs gates, massive steel slabs, stand ready. The levees, now 30 feet high, are patrolled by engineers who know the stories. Anna Muller's great-great-granddaughter, Dr. Elena Vasquez, is a hydrologist with the California Department of Water Resources. Every winter, she walks the American River levee at dawn. She carries her ancestors' ragdoll, faded but intact. She listens to the river. She runs models. She knows the numbers. The snowpack is 150% of normal. The Pacific is 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than in 1862. The jet stream is stuck. The water is coming. But this time, we have a choice. We can reinforce the levees, $20 billion, 10 years. We can restore wetlands, natural sponges that hold floodwater. We can relocate communities from floodplains. We can cap development in the valley, or we can wait. The rain is patient. The rivers are honest. The sky keeps its own counsel. In the end, the Great Flood of 1862 was not a disaster. It was a contract. We signed it in mud and blood. The terms are clear. Respect the water, or it will take everything. The ink is fading. The storm is gathering. And the lake is waiting to return.